My name is Rune and I'm a Danish historian of ideas, a writer and a poet. I would like to share a few thoughts on the curious lack of empathy towards our fellow species on Earth and nature as a whole, and what sort of inspiration we could find in other world perspectives more prevalent in the Viking Age and other eras in Western as well as non-Western history. Perspectives with very different outlooks on nature and that are worth contemplating in the unfolding anthropocentric era characterized by a nature crisis of historical proportions. Homo sapiens is also an animal. It's hardly something we reflect a lot upon. Rather, it's something we are inclined to forget, especially considering the hardships that billions of other animals must endure because of us. One need just to mention the harsh conditions in the battery cages of factory farming that almost makes herrings in a barrel look like a luxury cruise. But in face of the brutality to which we submit industrially farmed animals, as well as nature as a whole, we prefer to avoid any recognition of the fact that we too are animals. Of course, humans have always been eating meat, but we have not always killed animals with the same cynicism that we have grown accustomed to in our anthropocentric era. We stick to the spoken or unspoken claim that we are disconnected from and utterly incompatible with the animal kingdom. Perhaps it would be harder to instrumentalize this cynicism if we were a lot more conscious about our common origin and the connectedness of life. Naturally, it's easier for us to overlook the similarities and only notice the differences between man and all other animal species when most of us have virtually no real knowledge of the animals before they are reduced to a pound of clay-like minced meat wrapped in plastic or stuffed in sausage casings of animal intestines, or, if not destined to be served on a plate, as pets or in circus and sports, where animals are expected to fulfill the increasing needs of man's amusement, obviously unable to exercise their natural behavior in the wild. However, be it far from my intention to claim that pets and other amusement animals aren't generally cared for and treated well by most people, as opposed to the vast majority of industrially farmed animals. And our lack of empathy with billions of animals, be they confined to narrow cages their entire life, or be they wild animals deprived of their natural habitats, are signs of our forgotten ability to understand the kinship to nature, by which we have felt connected in most of our cultural history. Humans are also animals, even if we have developed skills to dominate most of the planet with such devastating imprints on global ecosystems that our era is named Anthropocene, the age of humans. The connectedness between humans and nature has deep biological as well as cultural roots, which we have discarded with far-reaching consequences to hundreds of millions of people who might lose their homes and livelihoods and face an inconsolable fate as climate refugees in decades to come. And with devastating consequences to countless of our fellow species on Earth, who are threatened with downright extinction due to a vast and often irreversible loss of habitats. Animist perspectives might be an antidote against our culturally determined belief that there are only subjects inside humans, and that these subjects perceive the outer world accurately and objectively as a bunch of mindless and soulless objects, and in the process, not surprisingly, crowning our ego as an emperor whose needs everything else revolves around and is subjugated. Such sharp distinctions are just how we often frame ourselves in the world today. Not the only way, and not a more truthful way than we find in other perspectives. In other words, animist perspectives might help us to bridge the rather self-indulgent gap in our heads that keep echoing of an anthropocentric mindset of the human mind as an isolated me-sphere, categorically detached from the rest of the world. Animist perspectives are relevant to reflect upon in a global nature crisis, but therefore also in a broader sense as a general antidote against the anthropocentric mantras me, and more, where spiraling greed and cynicism not only replace nature's diverse beauty with the endless monotony of plantations or concrete, but also expands inequality among nations as well as among people to levels of an astounding absurdity. In addition, knowledge of these perspectives provides us with a better understanding of the animist cultural historical roots that are also a widespread part of Western cultural history, as well as the continuity of the connectedness to nature that's an imminent part of these perspectives. A world with smaller egos, but with more persons and more capacious identities. Practically all the settings in which humans have been living in 99% of the era of Homo sapiens could be characterized as sheer wilderness. In that respect, it isn't odd that we still feel some sort of uplifting mental sensation, even just by observing nature. It's difficult to express in words how and why nature is this kind of solace to the soul, but perhaps we are instinctively reminded of the fact that our body and mind has evolved in and is evolutionarily adapted to the experience of nature. Once upon a time, we had room for the wilderness outside as well as inside ourselves, so to speak, and culture and nature weren't contradictions, but fluently interconnected. Today, we have abandoned and repressed, crumbled and thrown away nature in most parts of the world. So what to do when you want to recover something that's been misplaced? You return to where you last remember seeing it before you lost it. And in this part of the world where I live, it's not so much a place as it is an era, the Viking Age. As late as the end of the Iron Age, relations to nature could still be a vital part of the spiritual and cultural life, even of the identity of man. And in the Viking Age, one specific bird might symbolize the relation between man and nature: the raven. Likewise, the raven is an important person in a number of indigenous cultures and traditions from the Northern Hemisphere, often as a so-called trickster. Not only does the trickster exceed the borders between worlds, but also between humans and animals, between solemn seriousness and down-to-earth comedy, between egotism and altruism. Other tricksters, appearing in different animal guises, has fulfilled similar roles in countless cultures: bear, hare, crow, fox, spider, and many others. We are connected with nature, but we have neglected and ravished this connectedness in an era that confronts rather than respects nature. Animosity instead of kinship. That's why it is important to recover and retell this connectedness again, in new and old ways and in new and old shapes, in individual and common ways and in individual and common shapes. This is why also I raise the raven flag. But it needn't just be this flag. Any raven flag, or an entirely different species for that matter, can express and reinvent this connectedness to nature that feels individually relevant to re-establish. For those of us who wish to symbolize and exert a dissociation from escalating egotism and anthropocentrism. I have tried to express some of these thoughts in the third and last stanza of a poem in Danish, my native tongue, but with a literary prose translation. Vi har rod i gamle stammer, men vi skaber selv de rammer, der giver nye perspektiver på det nye, vi bedriver. Derfor vil vi digte videre på de nye tiders sider, åbne døren for lidt flere og forvilde os lidt mere. Færre regler, mere lighed, færre grænser, mere frihed. Det er rammerne, vi flytter, relationerne, vi knytter, og kulturerne, vi blander, når vi hæver ravnens banner.